Following the assassination of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony functioned as a seasoned military commander, overseeing a vast third of the Roman Republic's territory through brute force and strategic experience. This diagram illustrates the second triumvirate between Antony, Octavius Caesar, and Lepidus. While the triumvirate faced a rebellion led by Pompey, Antony's portion remained inactive. He abandoned his duties, leaving his co-rulers to handle the crisis alone. This absence created a vacuum in Rome's leadership. Octavius Caesar was forced to manage the empire's defense without his most experienced general, leading to a breakdown in communication and a sharp increase in political mistrust. This is a map of ancient Alexandria. While Rome prepared for war, Antony remained here, focused entirely on his relationship with the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a politically astute monarch who viewed her personal relationships as a primary diplomatic tool. She maintained Egypt's autonomy by aligning herself with Rome's most powerful figures, turning her court into a center of regional influence. Roman life demanded rigid martial discipline and constant service to the state. In Alexandria, Antony prioritized a cycle of feasting and hunting, allowing his military readiness to erode in favor of the court's indulgent atmosphere. The pressure of the empire eventually broke through this isolation. Reports arrived confirming that Antony's wife Fulvia had died in the midst of a rebellion against Caesar, and Pompey's fleet was now threatening to blockade Rome's grain supply. Antony had to choose between his life in Egypt and his status as a Roman ruler. To protect his political survival, he left Alexandria to negotiate a peace with the co-rulers he had spent years ignoring. Antony's return to Rome was met with immediate hostility. Octavius Caesar confronted him with a list of grievances, citing his abandonment of the triumvirate as a betrayal of their shared legal authority. To prevent civil war, the two brokered an alliance. Caesar had Antony marry his sister, Octavia, using family to anchor Antony to Rome. Octavia was a political pawn, valued for obedience. This directly contrasts Cleopatra, who retained her independent power and military command. This arranged marriage was merely a temporary fix. It created a surface-level peace that failed to address the underlying competition for power, leaving the Roman alliance dependent on a relationship Antony never intended to keep. The arrangement collapsed when Antony abandoned Octavia in Greece and returned to Egypt. His personal obsession with Cleopatra overrode the strategic necessity of his marriage, effectively ending the peace between the triumvirs. Antony then took his most provocative step yet, holding a public ceremony to declare Cleopatra the Queen of Kings and granting her children control over vast Roman territories. Caesar used these actions to turn Roman public opinion against Antony. He argued that Antony had lost his capacity to lead as a Roman man, having surrendered his judgment to a foreign monarch. This ideological divide led to a military confrontation at Actium in 31 BCE, deciding the future of the Roman world in a massive naval engagement. During the height of the battle, Cleopatra's ships suddenly withdrew from the conflict. In a move that stunned his own commanders, Antony abandoned his fleet and his soldiers to follow her ship into the open sea. In that moment, Antony's identity as a Roman general ended. By prioritizing his romantic attachment over his military command, he effectively surrendered his authority to Octavius Caesar. 1 year later, Caesar's forces arrived in Alexandria. With his army deserting and his fleet captured, Antony was trapped within the city walls as his political world disintegrated. Cleopatra, fearing Antony's anger after the defeat, retreated to her tomb and sent him a false report of her death, hoping to gauge his level of devotion. Believing he had lost everything, Antony attempted to reclaim a final measure of Roman dignity through a self-inflicted wound. He chose to die by his own sword rather than face capture by Caesar. The tragedy concluded when Antony learned Cleopatra was still alive. He was carried to her monument, where he died in her arms from his mortal injury. Antony's downfall was not a military necessity. His inability to separate his personal devotion from his strategic responsibilities had already eroded his capacity to lead, making his eventual collapse inevitable. Cleopatra now faced Caesar alone. She understood that being taken alive meant being paraded through the streets of Rome as a prisoner to celebrate Caesar's triumph. To avoid this humiliation, she committed suicide using venomous asps. She died in her royal robes, choosing to end her life on her own terms rather than live as a Roman captive. This final act allowed her to retain her autonomy. By removing herself from Caesar's planned victory parade, she dictated the end of her own story and denied him the satisfaction of her public submission. This marble bust depicts Octavius Caesar, who emerged from the conflict as the sole ruler of the Mediterranean. He utilized the wealth of Egypt to consolidate his power, officially ending the Roman Republic and becoming the first emperor, Augustus. Caesar won the empire through cold political calculation, but the public disintegration of Antony and Cleopatra's authority ensured their names would survive as the ultimate symbols of the conflict between duty and desire.